All right, let's dive into this one. We're taking a deep dive into Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, based on a podcast episode that really gets into the nitty-gritty. If you're into dystopian stories that make you think, Snowpiercer will definitely get your brain working, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of those films that just sticks with you. Long after it's over, you're still kind of processing it.
Totally. Just the basic premise is so fascinating. The last remnants of humanity stuck on this train that never stops, just going around and around a frozen Earth.
And that train, it becomes like a microcosm of society, right? Each car representing a different level, a different class.
Yeah, and you see that contrast so clearly between the haves and the have-nots. The way Bong Joon-ho uses the train's layout visually to represent that social hierarchy is just brilliant. It's not just showing us the difference between rich and poor. It's like you feel the weight of that disparity,
Right, exactly. And think about how the camera moves through the train. When we're in the tail section, the shots are often really cramped and chaotic. You really feel that claustrophobia, the desperation.
Yeah. But then, when we shift to the front sections, the camera glides through these spacious, opulent environments, and you immediately sense the privilege, the ease of the elite.
Oh, absolutely. That nightclub scene is a perfect example of that. It's this explosion of color, movement, so jarring compared to the tail section.
It's almost surreal, like a fever dream, It really highlights how disconnected the elite are from the realities that most of the train's passengers face.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast. And it's not just the visuals, right? The sound design also plays a huge role.
Oh, absolutely. In the tail section, you hear this constant cacophony, the clanking metal, the murmuring, the cries of children.
It's unsettling.
It creates this atmosphere of unease, reflecting that constant fight for survival.
And then you move to the front sections, and everything's hushed. Gentle music, a sense of order.
Right. Even the sound is controlled to maintain this facade of tranquility for the privileged few.
It's pretty disturbing when you think about it. Speaking of disturbing, we have to talk about the protein bars. That detail is just so unsettling.
It's like a symbol of how dehumanizing it can be, to be pushed to the brink of survival.
And the fact that we never actually see what's in those bars, it's left to our imagination, makes it even creepier.
Totally. You can feel the desperation of the tail section residents and the lengths the people in power will go to maintain control. It makes you think about how power works. It often relies on suppressing people's basic needs and exploiting the vulnerable. And that exploitation is what drives the rebellion. Led by Chris Evans's character, Curtis.
His performance is so captivating, especially coming from his Captain America role. He's so convincing as this hardened, world-weary character.
Right, and his backstory. We see it in those haunting flashbacks. It had so much depth to his motivation.
Oh, absolutely.
You understand the trauma he carries, the desperation that fuels his fight.
That scene where he describes what he saw in the tail section early on during the train's journey, it's just gut-wrenching.
It is.
You see the depths of the depravity, and you really get why he's leading this rebellion.
Yeah. But as the rebellion progresses, Curtis is forced to make these increasingly difficult choices.
Yeah.
The violence escalates, and the line between right and wrong gets blurred.
The film doesn't shy away from the brutality of it all, and I think that's a good thing. It acknowledges that revolution, even when it feels justified, comes at a cost. It makes us question the morality of fighting for a better world.
And it challenges those simple ideas of heroes and villains. Like Curtis, with all his anger, he's capable of extreme violence.
Right.
And Wilford, the train's leader, he's shown with this unsettling calmness.
It's true. The film avoids those easy labels. It gives us flawed characters, making impossible decisions, in a system that seems designed to keep itself in power.
It's thought-provoking. It makes you question the nature of revolution. Did Curtis achieve anything in the end? Or was he just playing into the hands of the people in control?
That ambiguity, I think that's what makes this film so powerful. You're left thinking about power and control, and if real change is even possible in such a rigid system.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about another character. Tilda Swinton as Minister Mason. She's absolutely mesmerizing.
She disappears into that role, creating this really unsettling mix of authority and absurdity.
I love how she delivers those lines with this deadpan humor, even when she's describing the most horrific things.
It's chilling, but also kind of funny.
It is.
It makes you think about how people in power use language to manipulate and control. She talks about order and balance like they're these divine principles, but she completely disregards the suffering those concepts inflict.
Yeah. Okay, let's bring in Song Kang-ho's character, Namgung Min-soo.
Yeah, he adds another layer to the story.
He's got his own perspective.
He doesn't buy into Curtis's revolution. He sees the limits of fighting for control within a system he thinks is broken.
He wants to escape the train altogether, find a different way to exist.
Right.
It brings up some important questions about freedom.
He represents a different kind of rebellion, one that seeks to break free from the entire system.
I like that. And that brings us to another key element of Snowpiercer, the environmental commentary. This train hurtling through this frozen wasteland, such a potent metaphor for the state of our planet.
Yeah.
It really forces you to confront the consequences of climate change and the possibility of ecological collapse.
The train becomes this symbol of humanity's last refuge, a desperate attempt to survive in a world ravaged by our own actions.
The fact that this train is all that's left after a failed attempt to reverse global warming, it's a chilling warning.
It really highlights how urgent it is that we address these issues and work together to prevent something like this from happening.
And the way each train car represents a different part of our relationship with nature. It's so well done. Like the aquarium car, showing the exploitation of marine life, the greenhouse car, showing our attempts to control nature.
It's like Bong Joon-ho is giving us a miniature version of our own environmental problems. It's a call to think about the impact of our actions and the choices we make.
Absolutely. Snowpiercer is more than just a dystopian thriller. It's a powerful allegory for the environmental crisis we're facing right now. A reminder that our choices today will have a profound impact on the future of our planet and the survival of our species.
You know, that train in Snowpiercer, it's not just a train, right? It's like a representation of the systems we create, the hierarchies, and that delicate balance that we tend to mess up.
Yeah, it really is like this contained social experiment playing out right in front of us. And you see the characters grappling with morality and survival. Like Curtis, he starts with a clear goal. Get to the engine, take control, but gets a lot more complicated as he goes.
Oh yeah, his anger, his desire for revenge. It makes sense, given everything he's been through. But as he faces each new challenge, the violence, the body count, you see him struggling with what it all means.
It's interesting how his motivations change. At first, it's all about getting back at the people in power. But then it becomes more about finding a way to make a just society on the train.
And that's where the film's take on class and power becomes really interesting. It's not just the physical fight for control. It's about challenging the whole system, the ideas that create inequality in the first place. We see this best in Curtis's interactions with Wilford, the guy who created the train.
Wilford's such a fascinating character. He's got this charisma, but he's also ruthless. A visionary, but also a tyrant.
Yeah.
He thinks he's saving humanity. But his methods are brutal.
He embodies that whole idea of a benevolent dictator, someone who truly believes they know what's best for everyone else.
And his control isn't just physical, it's psychological too.
Oh, totally. He manipulates people's beliefs, their hopes, even their sense of purpose.
He's built this whole mythology around the train, this idea of sacred order.
Yeah.
It's both brilliant and terrifying.
It's like he's created a religion out of necessity, a way to keep people in line, despite all the suffering.
And Bong Joon-ho uses these visual symbols to reinforce that sense of control. The train itself, with its rigid structure, it becomes a metaphor for this unyielding system.
And the way the camera frames the characters, often against these narrow corridors, it emphasizes their lack of agency, like they're trapped on this predetermined path.
The lighting, too. The tail section is always dark and grimy, but the front sections are bathed in bright, artificial light.
Yeah, suggesting this false sense of perfection.
But even in this oppressive system, there are moments of resistance, where characters show their humanity and challenge the way things are. Like Tilda Swinton's character, Minister Mason. She's cold and calculating, but you see cracks in her facade.
She's definitely drunk on power. But there are moments where you can sense some doubt, a little awareness of how absurd the whole situation is.
Right. And then you've got Namgung Min-soo. He represents a totally different kind of rebellion. He doesn't want to take over the engine. He wants to get off the train entirely.
He's obsessed with the train's security system, wants to understand how it all works. But it's not about control for him. It's about finding a way out.
Like he's trying to break a code, to unlock some secret that will lead to true freedom.
And his daughter, Yona, she's got this almost mystical connection to the train. They become partners in this quest.
They represent a different kind of hope, one that looks beyond the current system.
And imagines a future where humanity can exist in harmony with nature.
Speaking of nature, we have to talk about the film's environmental message. Snowpiercer isn't just about class struggle. It's an allegory for the ecological crisis we're facing.
Right, the frozen wasteland outside. It's a constant reminder of what climate change could do. What could happen if our world becomes uninhabitable?
And the train, with its closed ecosystem, it's a microcosm of Earth.
Yeah.
How resources are distributed, how waste is managed. It mirrors our own struggles to create a sustainable future.
Like the aquarium car.
Right.
With its display of sea creatures, it's such a strong symbol of how we exploit natural resources.
And the greenhouse car, with its carefully grown plants, represents our attempts to control and manipulate nature.
Bong Joon-ho doesn't give us easy answers to these issues, but he makes us face them. He wants us to think about our own role in the environmental crisis and consider the choices we're making for future generations.
The film's ending. It's ambiguous, but it does offer a glimmer of hope. The train derails. The survivors come out into a world that's starting to thaw.
Yeah.
It suggests that even after catastrophe, there's a chance for something new, a new beginning.
But it also makes you wonder about the future. Will these survivors learn from the past, or are they going to repeat the cycle of violence and oppression?
It's a question that sticks with you. And that's what makes this film so great. It makes you think, it makes you feel, and it inspires you to act.
Snowpiercer is a powerful film. It's a blend of social commentary, environmental allegory, and incredible visuals. It's a film that will stay with you long after you've seen it. It demands to be discussed, debated, to be picked apart. It pushes us to confront the complexities of our world and to imagine a better way forward.
We've been talking about all the heavy stuff in Snowpiercer. The class warfare, the environmental stuff. It can get pretty bleak. But we should also talk about how technically amazing this film is. Bong Joon-ho's direction is just masterful.
Oh, absolutely. Every single shot is so carefully put together. And the way he uses the limited space on the train to create those action scenes, it's just incredible.
I still think about that axe fight in the sauna car. The camera moving with them, the slippery floor, the steam. It was so intense and chaotic.
He really knows how to use movement and space to create tension. And the editing is just as good, cutting between different points of view, different parts of the train. It keeps you completely hooked.
Yeah, and the sound design is a huge part of that too. You hear every little sound, the metal, the engine, the screams. It's like you're right there in the action.
You're not just watching it, you're experiencing it.
What's also impressive is how Snowpiercer balances those crazy action scenes with these quieter, more thoughtful moments.
Right, and those moments are important. They give us time to get to know the characters better, to process everything that's happening.
Like that scene with Curtis and Namgoon, when they're just talking about their hopes for the future. It's really touching.
Yeah, you see a different side of them in those moments, a vulnerability that makes them feel more real.
It reminds you that even with all the chaos and violence, there's still room for hope and connection. Okay, speaking of hope, one of the most interesting things about Snowpiercer is how open-ended it is. Like that ending with the polar bear and the kids. What do you think it all means?
It's definitely ambiguous. Is it hopeful? A warning? Maybe both. I think it depends on how you look at it.
I think it shows that even after destruction, there's always a possibility for new life, a fresh start. But it's also a cautionary tale, right? Will these kids learn from the past, or will they just repeat the same mistakes?
It's a question that stays with you. And that's what makes a great film. It makes you think. It starts conversations.
Snowpiercer is definitely a conversation starter. It challenges how we think about power, about society, about the environment. And it does all of that while still being really entertaining to watch.
Yeah, it's a rare film that can pull that off. It has something to say, but it also tells a gripping story.
And that's why I think it's had such a lasting impact. It's not just a genre film. It speaks to our anxieties and our hopes as a society. It makes us face some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world.
It's a film that will keep resonating with people. It'll spark discussions and new interpretations for years to come.
Well, it looks like our deep dive into Snowpiercer has come to an end. We've really explored it all. The themes, the characters, how it was made, and its impact. Hopefully you've got some new insights into this thought-provoking film.
If you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely check it out. And if you have, maybe it's time for another watch. There's always something new to discover in this film.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.